Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Hart hpad01 20-volt radio with Bluetooth. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, starting off at the bottom of the tool, we have the battery slot. Now the battery slot on this particular device is actually fairly well engineered. Overall, the battery is locked into place very securely, and there is almost no looseness or play to speak of. So I think it's a very good showing. The placement of the battery slot is also very good. Being that it's on the bottom of the tool and not on the back of the tool or on the side of the tool means that it's a fairly well-balanced tool, and regardless of what size battery you put into it, it will remain well right where you put it, because the battery weight isn't going to be on the back of the thing, causing it to flip over or fall over or something like that. I've seen that with another radio of mine, and quite frankly, I'm pretty happy with the overall design here. Now, the battery life on this particular radio is going to depend on how big of a battery you have, but generally you should be able to get a pretty much full day's worth of work out of a 2 amp hour battery. So, quite frankly, it's a very acceptable performance, and I don't really have any complaints. And so, when it comes to the battery slot, I don't think there really is any major negatives, and everything seems to be a, well, good showing here. So, at the end of the day, no complaints. Okay, next up we have just the overall build quality of the radio. For the most part, it's an okay showing. It's made out of a hard plastic, and it's pretty much the same kind of plastic that you'll find on their drills and impact drivers, so it's fairly impact resistant. But unfortunately, we did not get any rubberized texture or bumper pads on any of the corners or on the back or front of the device, so if you do end up dropping it from any sort of a height, there is a chance that it could become damaged because there's no area to absorb the impact. So that is one particular area of the tool I would like to see improved upon in the future, would be to add, rubberized texture to help protect it if you were to drop it. Now, another area of this particular tool that I'm not a huge fan of would be the screen up here. I don't really have an issue with how easy it is to read the screen. It's fairly well, illuminated and visible. My issue is with the cover that goes over the screen. It is a very thin, very easily scratched, very damageable cover, and it's basically just like a harder version of clean saran wrap, or cling wrap, or whatever they call it. And quite frankly, this is definitely an area of the tool that is prone to get scratched up and is going to end up getting, well, damaged eventually, no matter what you do. So the screen on this particular radio is another area that I would have liked to see a little bit better workmanship put into it. But everything else when it comes to build quality is okay. So I don't really think there's anything too majorly negative other than just the material they put on the screen. But that's an issue that seems to plague several brands. So yeah, other than that, the build quality is fine. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the control panel, and it's a pretty good showing here. First up we have our power button, which is located on the top left side, and for the most part it's fairly responsive. You press it once and the device will turn on and automatically go to Bluetooth mode and pair with whatever the last device it was paired with if it's within range and turned on. And it takes it about 3 seconds to pair up. The screen will continuously flash blue because it just doesn't ever stop flashing blue. So it doesn't mean it's not paired, it just means that that's whatever it's set to. Following the following the power button, we have the, well, preset button, which also doubles as your play pause button. And it's fairly responsive. You press it once and the device will start playing music, and then you press it again for it to, well, pause. There's a little bit of a delay there, but it's not horrible, and it's a fairly old Bluetooth standard that I believe this is using, so don't be too surprised that when it's got, that little bit of a delay there. And I definitely would not use this particular device for, using for a speaker for, say, a projector or something, because there's just too much delay with Bluetooth. And then following the play pause function, you have your normal preset mode, which when you are in your AM FM mode, when you press it, it will
at the range and put it through the string of different...
It'll automatically go to the different radio stations that you have saved in when you go through and set your presets. So pretty simple function. You have 10 presets on both your AM and FM modes, so you have quite a bit of room to work with, and I very much doubt anyone's ever going to really fill up all the different presets, but who knows, maybe I'm completely wrong on that. But it's a fairly simple setup. And then of course, there really isn't much else to say about the preset mode there. Then you have your mode button, which will switch you in between your aux, your FM, AM, and Bluetooth mode. If you hold down on the mode button, it will also pop up your EQ mode, where you can adjust your bass from basically, -5 all the way up to +5. So you got a little bit of an EQ to work with there. You press it again, and it will take you into the treble or tibble or whatever, however you pronounce that. And it's the same thing, -5 up to +5. So pretty, normal setup there. If you don't press it quick enough, it will automatically switch it back to the normal mode, and then you'll have to, well, hold it and then, wait for the menu to pop up again. So, you have to be fairly quick, but it's, not a horrible setup. And then you have your advanced buttons for going through radio stations or advancing to the next track or fast forwarding during up audio podcasts. Pretty self-evidatory, and there's still a little bit of delay with these two, so, it's just that older Bluetooth standard that this particular device is using. And then of course you have your selector buttons or your volume buttons here on the other side, and they're fairly responsive and they work fairly quickly because they're not actually using the Bluetooth on your device, they're just using the audio volume controls in the device. So they're fairly responsive there. So there really isn't any ugly surprises other than the fact there's a little bit of delay when it's talking with your device because it's using an older Bluetooth standard, and there really isn't much else to say. For the most part, it's a pretty simple setup, so it gets a pass from me. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up we have the ports. Now this particular tool has two different ports. It has your aux cable port for if you wanted to plug this, say, into a computer, tablet, MP3 player without Bluetooth, or even an older phone that still has an audio jack. But those are becoming increasingly rare, unfortunately. And it also has a USB port that can charge at 1 amp and 5 volts. So pretty basic, and you're not going to be doing any sort of fast charging on any device, but it's better than nothing, and it can keep your phone, well, at a maintained charge level for a period of time, or it can slow charge your phone. So you're not going to be doing a quick refill on your phone with this particular device, but it's definitely better than, well, not having anything. And it will allow you to use your Hart batteries in order to charge your devices in an emergency situation. So that is nice. So yeah, one complaint I do have about these particular ports is the fact that there are no covers for them. I would have liked to have seen some sort of a cover that goes over the aux port and the USB port, because this is going to be prone to getting debris and other stuff in them, especially in job site conditions. So this is definitely a little bit of a black eye for Hart here, because they, well, didn't put any cover over them, and that's just, well, not really acceptable with a device such as this for the price that you're paying. So definitely an area on this particular tool that could use some improvement. And also, considering the price that you're paying, at least a 2 amp charging port would have been nice as well. You don't have to give us PD or fast Qualcomm charging or any of that. Just give us something that's a little bit quicker than 5 volts. That's as basic as you can possibly go, and unfortunately that just really isn't adequate in today's age. So yeah, a little bit of a disappointment when it comes to the charging ports on this device. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, and we also have the carrying handle. Now the carrying handle is going to allow you to get a couple of fingers through, but it's fairly tight, and if you have especially large fingers, you may not be able to get your fingers through. It is better than on several other radio devices I've seen on the market, but at the same time it could definitely use some improvement by making it just a tiny bit taller. But that would also make the device a little bit larger, so there is a little bit of a trade-off there. So yeah, the handle itself is going to be very secure, and I don't really think you're going to need to worry about it because it's very solidly built and it shouldn't be broken easily. So yeah, it's adequate, but it could be a little bit taller to make it a little bit easier to carry. Okay, and last but not least, we have the antenna. And it's there, it folds up, and it should, in theory, give you a little bit better reception in certain circumstances. For me personally, I haven't actually really noticed that big of a difference in between having it, well, in a folded position or having it straight up. So your usage may vary, but it may be helpful in certain situations. But for me personally, I just don't think it's going to give you enough of an increase in the overall height here, or just the ability to pick up signals, because it's a plastic coated antenna. And so quite frankly, I'm just one of those people that like the old school metal ones a little bit better, even though they were very prone to breaking. So yeah, the antenna is there, but I wouldn't expect it to be all that helpful in a lot of different situations. It does fold down nicely, and it doesn't unfold easily, so it's kind of out of the way, and it's not something you should have to worry about. But to be completely honest, I don't find it all that useful. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, something that is missing from this particular radio is a place where you can hang it on a screw or hook on the side of a wall or something. Unfortunately, we did not get any places where you could easily hang this on top of a nail or screw, and you'll need a very large hook in order to hang it by the handle, which is an option, but not the most ideal, scenario here. So I think it would have been nice if we had gotten some sort of a cutout here so that we could hang it on top of a, well, screw or nail. So that is something I think they could improve upon in the future, and it really wouldn't cost them all that much money. So just some ideas. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on again. Okay, moving on to the weight of the tool. Without a battery, it weighs 552 grams, which is going to be about 1.2 pounds. And with a 2 amp hour battery, it weighs 927 grams, which is going to be right over 2 pounds. So, quite frankly, it's pretty lightweight. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this particular device in use. And I have to say, it's not horrible, but it's not exactly the best either. In use, you're looking at about 30 feet of range in between you and the device, and if there's nothing separating the device and, well, the speaker, you can get about 100 feet, but the minute anything goes in between it, well, you're going to, well, lose your connection there. And then when it comes to objects in between the two devices, you're looking at closer to 20 feet, and if it's an especially thick wall or metal filing cabinets or human bodies that are full of water, which block, you know, Bluetooth signals or Wi-Fi signals, you're going to drop that range closer to the 10 to 15 feet. So the reception on this is pretty average for a Bluetooth speaker. So those are just a few of the things you need to know quickly. When it comes to the audio levels, on audio podcasts, you can go all the way up to 16, and it's fairly, well, easy to understand what's going on in here and, you know, hear what the person is saying. But when it comes to music playback and complicated music that requires lots of changes on the speaker, your limit's going to be closer to around 13% on that power level. So, you know, it's not horrible, but it's not great either. It's just kind of, you know, middle of the pack. Loudness wise, this particular speaker does put out quite a bit of, you know, volume, and it does seem to do a fairly good job even in open areas. But it definitely is not a block rocker or, you know, any of the larger, you know, more expensive speakers that are on the market. So, you know, temper your expectations when buying this particular, you know, Bluetooth speaker, that it probably will be better in indoor environments, and it's definitely not going to drown out a power saw or anything like that. And when it comes to, well, just the overall, you know, design and the philosophy behind this particular speaker, they got a lot of things right, they got a lot of things wrong. They got the battery on the bottom, which helps it maintain its even weight, which is good, but there's no rubberized pads, which is bad. So, you know, there's pros and cons. When it comes to reception, this thing does an exceptionally good job with the FM bands, which is pretty normal for any radio, but the AM bands are definitely going to be quite a bit harder to pick up, which is normal, and pretty much all radios struggle with them because of just the way that the frequency works. And even Tesla stopped putting AM radios in their cars, so, you know, that's just something to be aware of. The AM is sort of a dying format, unfortunately. So, you know, just something to keep in mind, because it's a weaker signal, it just doesn't work nearly as well, and this particular radio definitely seems to struggle quite a bit more when it comes to the AM side of things. The aux works extremely well, and it definitely does a fairly decent job at, you know, getting the audio quality from whatever you're using into the device quickly, and I don't think there's really anything that's super negative about the aux other than the fact that there's no port covers for either one. And when it comes to the charging port, I really would like to see a faster charging function, but we didn't get that either. So, you know, just another one thing to keep in mind. So with all that being said, you know, it's a fairly decent little speaker, but it definitely has some drawbacks, and you shouldn't expect it to be a world apart from, you know, any other Bluetooth speaker on the market that's from a tool manufacturer. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. And the first pro is 20 volt. 20 volt means that this will work with all your Hart 20 volt batteries, and you can adapt batteries over from other brands if you can find an adapter. Just remember, you do that at your own risk. FM. The FM radio band comes in clearly, and quite frankly, I don't have any complaints, and it's a nice option to have, so this is a pro in my opinion. And the next pro would be the aux. The aux allows you to use this with PCs or other devices that still have an audio jack, and will eliminate any sort of delay that is caused by the Bluetooth, so this is another nice option to have on this radio. USB charging. Having a USB charging port will help you in emergency situations or just maintain the charge in your phone in everyday use, so this is a pro in my opinion. Loud for size. Overall, this is a fairly loud little speaker, and considering its size, I'm fairly happy with its performance, so this is a pro in my opinion. EQ. Overall, the EQ is a nice little hidden feature, and if you didn't read the user manual, you might not know about, but in my opinion, this is a pro because it allows you to customize your music to your liking a little bit more than on other radios on the market. And last but not least, presets. The presets will allow you to easily achieve whatever radio station you want without having to search through the bands, as long as you remember to save them, so in my opinion, this is a pro. And the first meh would be the antenna. The antenna is a nice feature to have, and it does help a little bit, but quite frankly, it doesn't help enough. And I would have preferred to see a larger antenna or maybe just a more traditional antenna. So in my opinion, this is just kind of meh. And the next meh would be the AM radio. It's nice that it has it, and if you're close enough to a station, it probably comes in fairly clearly. But if you're any sort of distance away from a tower power the station, it's just not going to be all that useful, so it's just kind of meh. And the next meh would be the small handle. Overall, the handle on this particular device is rather small, and quite frankly, it would have been very helpful if it was larger. If you have large fingers, this may be an issue for you, so please keep that in mind before purchasing. And the first con would be no port covers. They got really cheap here and didn't give us any port covers, which means debris and other stuff can get into the ports, which could cause damage or just problems. So in my opinion, this is a con. And the next con would be the thin plastic display cover. Overall, this is very prone to getting scratched up and just is not a high quality part of the tool. So this is something that could be improved upon in the future. Muddy audio after volume 13. When you're listening to music, the highest you should probably go with this particular radio is going to be audio level 13, but for audio podcasts, you can still go to level 16. So just something to keep in mind. Not a big con, but still a little bit of a con. No USB player. On certain devices from China, sometimes they have a TF port or a USB port that will allow you to play MP3 tracks off of a USB drive. Unfortunately, this radio does not do that, so that is a little bit of a disappointment. Not expecting it to, but that would have been cool if it could have. Only 5 volt, 1 amp charging. It's a slow charger, and it definitely isn't going to get your device up to full quickly, so it's a bit of a con, and for the price that you're paying, we should have seen faster charging. Single speaker. Overall, the single speaker is okay, but that definitely will affect your overall quality, and it would have been nice to see a multi-speaker design here. And for the price that you're paying, I've seen other speakers in the same price range that have multiple speakers on them. So, quite frankly, you know, this is a little bit of a con. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular speaker. Overall, it's not a half-bad little speaker, but it definitely is overpriced, coming in at $51. And quite frankly, at that price point, I just really can't recommend it. If it was priced closer to $30, I think it would be a more acceptable price, and I would have a lot, well, less of a hard time saying to avoid it. So if you can find it on sale or at discount, I'd say go ahead and pick it up. But considering that it does have a few minor issues, it just really isn't worth the $50 price tag. And so, yeah, I'd say wait till you can find it on sale, or just try to maybe pick up a used one from somebody who's switching tool systems. So with that being said, we will see you all next time, and I hope you have a lovely week. God bless.